Alright, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be volume 1 in a new series that I'm starting called Pupil of Narcissus. And this first edition will be featuring the beleaguered superstar wide receiver currently of the New England Patriots, Mr. Antonio Brown. And the reason why I'm calling this series Pupil of Narcissus is because all throughout the sports world and just this world that we live in are people that we call narcissists, which is basically a fancy term for a self-worshipper. This is a term that was initially utilized by many of the psychologists of the late 19th century to describe people who had issues, normally sexually. They were infatuated with quote-unquote masturbation, which is very ironic because this is going to be a component of the Antonio Brown story in this video. According to many of these psychiatrists / psychologists of the late 19th century, like Havelock Ellis, who was a sexologist that I mentioned in a video a very long time ago, as well as people like Sigmund Freud, people who were narcissists, they tended to actually prefer masturbating than to having actual sex with someone, whether it be someone of the same gender or of another gender. And beyond that, they had an incessant need to venerate themselves and to have other people worship them or venerate them. The term narcissist comes from the character of Narcissus, who was just a pseudonym of who we know in the scriptures being Nimrod. The name Narcissus literally means the son of Cush. And in the story of Narcissus, very similar to the story of Orion, he was a great hunter who eventually saw his reflection in a body of water, and he became so captivated by his reflection that he fell in love with the reflection. As usual with many of the tales involving Nimrod, whether it is him as Osiris or him as Baal or him as the Bacchus, there is normally a pansexual element because the concept of the orgiastic rites normally revolve around narcissism. So just to get back to the point, the character of Narcissus eventually saw himself or a reflection of himself in a pool of water and fell in love with himself. And he became so enraptured by his own reflection that he tried to figure out a way to convey the amount of undying love that he had for the image that he saw, not even realizing that it was he himself. He walked off trying to ponder how he could seduce the person that he saw in the reflection in the body of water. And I believe that it was one of the mother goddess figures, it may have been Aphrodite, who smote him in such a way that he ended up destroying himself due to his own self-veneration. And we see this a lot in the sports world. Who is it who tends to take down these narcissists in the sports world or in the entertainment sphere, whether it be politics, the movie world, the singing world, etc.? It's normally a female fan. And we're seeing this here with Mr. Antonio Brown. That's always going to be a major component with these assets in the entertainment industry, whether it's R. Kelly, Antonio Brown, whoever you want to name. It's the woman who tends to be the Achilles heel of these narcissists, because the woman can be extremely vindictive, especially when the ardor or the fervency for that person, the object of their desire, is unrequited. And we know that most of these women, they have ulterior motives. For the most part, they're not in it for the quote-unquote love. They're in it for startup money, maybe for their own business, which in my view is the reason why this person, Brittany Taylor, is making the allegations that she's making. It's also extremely strange to me that she would pursue a civil suit as opposed to taking this case to the police department first and trying to have Antonio Brown incarcerated in a criminal case. That tells me that she knows that she does not really have a leg to stand on in many of her allegations. There have been some text messages that were revealed to the public in which Antonio Brown seems to reveal that he masturbated on her back. Just show you that he has no respect for the chick whatsoever. But were they in a consensual sexual relationship? In my opinion, yes. But the real question that I have for many of these mainstream sports media outlets, and I've asked this question in the past, is where was this wall-to-wall coverage when Kristaps Porzingis was accused of rape by a woman who lived in his building? Where was this wall-to-wall coverage when the former Giants place kicker Josh Brown was accused of beating the shit out of his wife 30 plus times? This is what I call racialism, and we see it in the mainstream media over and over again. Normally the mainstream liberal media, the mainstream liberal sports media, who always tries to act as if they're a friend to the so-called black man. They do these 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute segments based on the frivolous allegations of a woman, no matter what race she is. And that's another thing, not to digress. But so many of you brothers who pay attention, you know that they tried to demonize the so-called black man from pursuing relations with females of other races. They try to fearmonger and tell him that if you deal with a Caucasian woman or with a Hispanic woman or with an Asian woman, they're going to cry rape. They're going to accuse you of things that you didn't do. As I always tell you, brothers, we're in Babylon. All of these women are Babylonian. They will all lie. They will all connive to get what they want, depending on their character or lack thereof. Doesn't matter what their race is, because they're all Babylonian. Their religion is feminism. Okay? That's the bottom line. That's the number one religion of the so-called woman of the Western society or the Western hemisphere is feminism. It has nothing to do with their race or what have you. You have dark-skinned Babylonian women. You have Caucasian Babylonian women. You have Babylonian women with quote-unquote slanted eyes. You have Babylonian women who wear hijabs. You have Babylonian women that put dots in the middle of their forehead. It doesn't matter. Once they've been Europeanized / Americanized, that is what they are. So we have to tread lightly with every person that we interact with that's of the female persuasion. We have to tread lightly with every person, period, especially as a so-called black man, where they can make any allegation and the liberal sports media, the liberal media, period, will rake you over the coals. And if and when you're exonerated, they're taught to say, well, he was just found not guilty. He was not found innocent. That's their way to slither out of the false accusations that they immerse themselves in for the sake of a media cycle. Reuben Foster's name was raked over the coals. He was recently basically exonerated. There were no segments made about the false accusations that were made about Reuben Foster, nor the attempts by the media to destroy his good name. And I predict that should Antonio Brown be relieved of a lot of these allegations, which I believe that he most likely will, they're not going to issue a mea culpa. They're just going to say, well, we know that Antonio Brown is not really a good person anyway, so that's par for the course. They really don't care. And that's the reason for the rise of internet sites like Derek Jeter's The Player Tribune. A lot of people like Stephen A. Smith are very frustrated with the way that players go to tell their own story, whether it's through social media or through that website. But anyway, just to get back to the point, Antonio Brown is a pupil of Narcissus. He will eventually destroy himself. This might be a component in that destruction, but it will come eventually in some way, shape, or form, as it does for all narcissists to some degree. The last great destruction of a narcissist in the sports world that we saw of someone of a high prominence was Lance Armstrong. I call LeBron James the basketball version of Lance Armstrong. He seems to be very buttoned up. LeBron James is, though. And we know he has a major corporation backing him. So it's going to be very difficult to catch him in a lot of the technology that he propagates over the media airwaves, especially to try to build up a greater name for himself as being a soldier for equality, quote unquote. But just to get back to Antonio Brown, let's just see how they report this story. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Welcome back to First Take. In case you're just joining us, Antonio Brown has been accused of sexual assault by his former trainer, Brittany Taylor. Taylor accused Brown of 3 incidents of sexual assault in 2017 and 2018.
So after she was sexually assaulted the first time, she went back for 2 more.
Including an alleged rape, according to the civil suit filed in the Southern District of Florida. Brown's attorney said the wide receiver denies all allegations and said the two had a consensual personal relationship.
I believe it.
Patriots said they take those allegations very seriously. Under no circumstances does this organization condone sexual violence or assault.
Can you imagine how many allegations Roger Goodell and his team receive on their desk every day from women claiming that they were sexually assaulted by NFL players? If you remember, in the direct aftermath of the Ray Rice incident, if they even received a whiff of an allegation, they were suspending players. Now they're starting to fall back from that. Because for every female who alleges that someone raped her and there's actually substance to the story, there's probably 100 who are just lying to see if they can run some guy's name through the mud who never returned their call or who busted a nut on their damn forehead and said, okay, your Uber's outside, move along. And they're upset by that.
I will be investigating the matter. According to the Patriots, Brown is expected to practice today with the Pats. On that note, we now welcome in Dominique Foxworth. Ryan Clark's still here with us, and I want to mention you were president of the NFLPA, and you were obviously on the executive board. So thrilled to have your take on all of this, guys. But Stephen A., I want to start with you. What do you think New England should do with Brown now?
They should do exactly what they're going to do, which is issue a statement, fall back, and wait to see how the chips fall.
I think they should wait to see what the commissioner decides, because if you're an individual team, then obviously you're innocent until proven guilty, and that's the approach that you have to take. It's the league which has the tool of the commissioner's exempt list to utilize to decide, regardless of your guilt or innocence, this is how the league has been affected by these allegations, and because of that, we're going to keep you out of the league.
So in other words, anyone can say anything, and that can impact a professional sports team because of quote-unquote optics. That sounds like a lot of liberal rhetoric and nonsense. No, we can't have that.
Individual team, your obligation is to your team, and you want to exercise guilt before and until proven guilty, and I think that's the safe way for the Patriots to go.
So if the Patriots set him, that would let everybody off the hook. But I think they won't, because that is not the Patriots'
I apologize,
way.
the Patriots did what?
If they set him out, if they put him on the bench, that would let everybody off the hook. But I doubt that's what they do, and I think
nor should they do that. Winners don't operate according to the whims of the masses, because they know that the masses are sheep. You never go according to what the masses of people believe, because most of them, they're just the receivers of trickle-down messages. They're not even quite sure why they think what they think. The average person out here is a damn sheep, and it's no disrespect. The Patriots operate from the standpoint of a shepherd, and I'm sure that people are going to say the Patriots are involved in a lot of diabolical processes and storylines over the course of the past 20 years. No doubt about it. But at the end of the day, you don't win, you don't conquer by following optics and things that are not truly tangible.
Your perspective, what you brought up, Ryan and I both were very involved. The union's responsibility is not necessarily to protect Antonio Brown in this case, but it's to protect the precedent. So they need to make sure that the process is followed. So while it's very uncomfortable for DeMaurice Smith and many of the players who lead the union in situations like this when someone has allegations this serious, but they have to protect.
Why would that be uncomfortable? If you're uncomfortable upholding the code of your organization just because someone has made allegations that are as outlandish as this woman's allegations, and I call them outlandish because at the end of the day, if you believe that you're the recipient of 3 separate sexual assaults and you never once went to the police, I have to question your own sanity. People might say, well, you're victim shaming. I don't believe in the concept of victim shaming. If you believe that you've been victimized, then you have to seek restitution immediately, either from the person who attempted to victimize you or from the court of law, the police, or what have you. But that has to be rectified immediately. So I have a very hard time believing that this female who found a way to gather herself to develop a civil suit could not have done the same thing in pursuing, some type of law enforcement.
Him in this situation, not because it's Antonio Brown, but because the next guy who's going to get accused of something, no matter what he's accused of, you need to uphold innocent until proven guilty as much as you possibly can, because that's something that we frankly have struggled with in the history of the relationship with the league and the players. And Ryan knows this quite well, because when we were going through CBA negotiations, there was one team that was steadfast about not signing the CBA agreement, and it was because of commissioner discipline, and that team was Ryan Clark's team, the Steelers.
Yeah, and so the hard thing here is when we look at it from the outside, anything dealing with sexual assault, with rape, you think to yourself, we want to act very fast because we want the NFL to be the moral high ground that shows people that these things can't go on. But the NFLPA has to make sure that that's not the way it happens, that the process is...
It's the same reason why you have a defense attorney in a conventional court of law, because now you empower liars if you just allow optics to rule the day. And that's what a lot of these super liberal females are attempting to implement with this quote-unquote Me Too movement mentality. Unfortunately, men in Western society have been pussified. They've had their spinal column detached from their body, because in all reality, men should probably start a movement called You Too, meaning you women make false allegations. Women take advantage of men who are not in a position of power in the workplace. Many female bosses sexually harass men. And on top of that, one of the most heinous things that anyone can do to another person is accuse them of a sexual assault or rape that they did not commit. Probably the only worst accusation is child abuse, or some form of sexual abuse of children, pedophilia per se. So these women need to be held accountable for their false accusations. And that's not happening right now because so many men are just in a fog worshiping the feminine principle or the quote-unquote divine feminine.
That the process is handled in a way to where they get all the facts before they make decisions. And so in that, we can't ask the New England Patriots to do that either. You can't say, New England Patriots, we want you to set a precedent by sitting Antonio Brown until all the facts are clear, because that's just not how it works. And so when you look at Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft, who has said in a statement, if you heard Mike Reese this morning, that there is no gray area when it comes to acts of domestic violence, when it comes to acts of sexual assault. He doesn't have all of the facts.
He's told me that personally. That's the one thing he doesn't move on. He'll tolerate anything but that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he'll also tolerate going to a massage parlor down there in Florida and making sure that all the prostitutes understand that his code name is $5 Sucky Sucky.
But he doesn't have all of the facts. So if you do sit Antonio Brown, you are almost giving him a guilty verdict. You are almost saying, you know what, you're guilty until proven innocent, and that's just not the way this process works or the way the NFLPA will allow it to work.
And that's the exact reason why women are never to be involved in the implementation of protocols involving administration or any type of judicial committee, because they're going to lead with their feelings and everybody's going to fall.
Subject first came up and I first learned about it, I thought I was going to say this exact thing. And I am always in these cases saying everyone is in a rush to judgment. Let's wait for the facts to come out. The facts, as I understand them so far, are as follows. He did not warn the Patriots that this was an ongoing situation when he joined the team. That would be, if I were the Patriots, strike one and maybe two, maybe three. But when I read, and I understand, we're not a jury, we have not been given instructions.
Max Kellerman, do you truly believe that neither Antonio Brown, nor more specifically Drew Rosenhaus, failed to mention to the Patriots that this civil suit was coming down the pike? And do you truly think that Bill Belichick gives a shit? He doesn't care about this nonsense. Bill Belichick was the defensive coordinator of the New York Giants during the 1980s when Lawrence Taylor was running roughshod through the tri-state area, banging broads and sniffing up entire snowdrifts of cocaine. He's seen it all. He don't give a shit about this nonsense.
Judge, we don't know all the facts or how they may be contextualized. There's a text message reportedly sent by Antonio Brown, which is now circulating. People can see this, where he claims to have done something while she was sleeping. Whatever else he denies, or even if the argument is made, well, I was just saying that to
there's no consent there.
Right, it's impossible to give consent. Even if you try to contextualize it in a relationship where that was an ongoing understanding, that's a long way to go.
Max Kellerman, give me a break. The dude said that he busted a nut on her back. I'm not even quite sure if he specified in the message that she happened to be asleep when it happened. She may have been asleep when it happened, but at the end of the day, in order for him to bust a nut on her back, that means that she was already unclothed. There's very little doubt in my mind that he was in a consensual, quote-unquote consensual relationship with a female who thought that she would use him as inroads to develop her own business. Supposedly, they knew each other going all the way back to college. And that's why I tell you brothers repeatedly, not to digress once again, but that concept of the quote-unquote male friend and female friend, all that is dick in a glass. That's all that is. Eventually, people who happen to be quote-unquote friends and are of different genders or opposing genders, they are going to do something, especially if one of the people in that dynamic, specifically the female, is in need of assistance. Because most women understand that when they're down on their luck, they still have their vagina as a commodity. It's a harsh, cold truth, but it is what it is.
Really bad. And I'm not saying this is the proper way to proceed, because there is a presumption of innocence, even if that standard is lower in a civil suit. But were I running the Patriots? Just beat the Steelers by 1,000,000 points week one without Antonio Brown, just won a Super Bowl. And I'm not even saying, well, you would bend your ethics in order to, I'm being realistic. Were I the Patriots, I probably would move on from Antonio Brown right now.
Let me come to Dominique and Ryan with
Why would the New England Patriots all of a sudden display a level of ethics that they've never displayed over the course of the Bill Belichick era?
Question. I get it, because I feel where everybody's coming from.
I mean, for goodness sakes, Bill Belichick drafted Aaron Hernandez, a dude who he knew was troubled from when he was with Florida.
But I must ask you, in light of the precedent that has been established by the commissioner and the league office as it pertains to the commissioner's exempt list, people that have been put on there, the Adrian Petersons, the Kareem Hunts of the world, although, Greg Hardy's, all these folks who were indicted, stuff like that.
Right.
And that's not the case here. Because of that precedent, do y'all see any way where the commissioner could actually avoid putting him on the commissioner's list?
He's had some good opinions on this, so I'll let you go first, D.
No, I mean, I think it goes back to the commissioner's exempt list is they try to present it as if it is not a punishment.
Right.
It is a punishment. The fact that you still get paid is one thing. So this is still putting out a guilty verdict before it's proven. So
Yeah, basically they're putting you in a proverbial holding cell.
The commissioner's exempt list, just because you're getting paid, doesn't mean that there's not a price to
What's the
pay.
purpose of the exempt list?
The purpose of the exempt list is to protect the image of the league. That's the purpose.
But
frankly,
wouldn't this be fall into
into
that category?
If I were the commissioner, it's something that I may consider. But I'm just saying that from a union standpoint, and everything changes with personnel. We can go back to Adam.
Right, but you're putting Antonio Brown onto the commissioner's exempt list to determine what? The NFL is going to engage in an investigation to see if this woman's claims are valid when she does not even believe that they were valid enough to take to the police force? What exactly are they supposed to be trying to substantiate here? It would make no sense to put him on the exempt list because there's no criminal case right now. There's only a civil case. So even if you want to say that it's for appearance of what? She's made an allegation that anyone could make.
Jones. That was an important, pivotal moment for the players because the players were very upset with all the trouble he was getting in because they believed that it reflected poorly on us. And that was the first time where the players stepped up.
But I don't want to run away from the subject. Right. What I'm asking y'all is, as guys that obviously were union members and officers within the union, I'm saying based on what we're seeing right now, this is exactly the commissioner having any choice.
I see him having a choice,
okay.
But I also see why he would lean to doing something like this. Max, the things you brought up and mentioned, I agree with those things. And I also agree from my standpoint, if I was the New England Patriots, I would want to distance myself from this. I would also know that I don't need it, right? But we don't get to make these decisions. And if you're the commissioner, I know Dominique mentioned that if the New England Patriots stepped up and sat him, it would help a lot of people. From the commissioner's standpoint, if he...
New England might do that just to put forth the appearance that they're receptive to any type of outside pressure or optics per se. But in reality, it might just be to give Antonio Brown time to learn their system.
Use the commissioner's exempt list to be done with this for the time being. It definitely helps. And I know these are conversations that are being had. Right. There's also going to be some pushback in some way. The NFLPA has to represent Antonio Brown in that as well.
I understand that position. If I were the commissioner, I would want to do that. But the fact of the matter is, the reason why I brought up Adam Pac-Man Jones, it was because we as the players looked at that particular person.
That was something we wanted.
Yeah, and we allowed the fact that it was that person who had that history change the way that we treated it, and we encouraged the commissioner to take disciplinary action before conviction was held. And that was a precedent that they needed to set forth all the actions going forward where they took these steps forward. So I bring this up now because Antonio Brown's name and his reputation is influencing the way that we look at this, and it should not.
It went by way of bringing up Pac-Man Jones. Are you saying that the union made a mistake because
that has to be what he's saying?
That allowed the precedent to be set. Yeah, so whatever the circumstances are heading in, it is the union's job automatically to fight to the extent that they can against this so that precedent isn't reinforced.
Yeah, I mean, Gene Upshaw was the executive director then, and it was not Gene's doing. Gene stood strong in saying that we should not do that. And several players, a group of which I was a part of, were very upset with the way that the league was looking and the way the players were being perceived. And so we kind of stepped out there and were like, yeah.
In other words, you guys were all caught up in your feelings, and you ended up making the same mistake that people make when they get caught up in their feelings, which is a dumb mistake.
and do what you got to do. But prior to that, you think back to Ray Lewis. Nothing happened to Ray Lewis when all that stuff was happening down in Miami until after the decisions were made, and then finally the penalty was very small. So I think this is important to remember. While we all have opinions about Antonio Brown, we have to understand that we should treat him the same way we were talking about opposition.
Too many people talking at once. Let Ryan Clark make his point. I mean, damn.
That of an opinion. I'm just saying that based on the recent history involving the commissioner's exempt list, I would be shocked if he's not on it in 48 hours.
I guess this would be my...
You wouldn't be shocked. You're just hoping that he's on the commissioner's exempt list in 48 hours because you don't like how he's made your Pittsburgh Steelers look. You don't like how he's made you feel. And you don't like a lot of the chaos that he has promoted.
That's all I'm saying.
More so on a personal level, distancing yourself from the PA. The fact of what Max was saying in light of the act taking place while she was asleep, in light of in the civil suit, him saying, I felt like a rapist, don't you feel like that's reflecting poorly?
No,
that the NFL
definitely.
and the Patriots, and based on just everything that's transpired over this past year with him.
But see, but I think that's the point Dominique is making as well.
We
have to take away the things that have transpired outside of this situation because they aren't of this magnitude.
That's right.
They aren't
Totally
they aren't
separate
involving a young lady like that. This is just those things is him being a bad teammate.
Is this situation enough to reflect poorly on the NFL in your opinion?
Oh yeah, I think everything that the players do reflects on the NFL positively and negatively. And I understand this situation. Like I mentioned, if I were the commissioner, I would try to do that, and I would not be upset at that situation. But the point that I'm bringing up is that there will be another incident where something else comes up. A player gets accused of shoplifting. Something like that will come up, and then the precedent will be set that we stood idly by and allowed them to. Without
the
evidence?
PA has to fight.
So that's
what about forgive me, I don't mean to mansplain this, as they say, right? But this was also
yes, and you love every minute of it because, like most feminists, you wish that you were a damn man.
This was also the point I was making earlier. What about simply what he admitted or what he claimed he did in a text message? Once you send a text message, if the other party claims to wants to make that public, you have no right to privacy, as far as I understand it, right? So if she makes that public, just the fact that he wrote what he did in that text message, wouldn't that rise to the level of being on the commissioner's exempt list?
The commissioner exempt list is something that he...
You have to be able to read these messages with an understanding of context, though. Just because he says, I felt like a rapist, like, what does that really mean? There are things that people do in their bedroom where they might make certain admissions, quote unquote, after the fact and after the act in a text message that to someone reading it and not understanding the context might say, well, this person is a sexual predator. But they were doing their own little freakiness in the bedroom. Just the fact that this person, once again, has taken so long to come forth with these allegations, these alleged allegations that supposedly happened repeatedly, tells me that something is going on here with this overall situation.
Right? It's not
and never, ever underestimate the bitterness of the woman. Men can become embittered as well. But the woman, boy, good Lord. Solomon said he finds them more bitter than death in Ecclesiastes 7:26.
And so it speaks to what Dominique, it speaks to Dominique's point of like, there's no set rules. It doesn't say if you do this, then I can put you on the commissioner exempts list. And so there is all types of gray area and that you have to figure out in there. And so yes, if he,
in other words, context. Gray area equals context.
The decision that is enough, the commissioner could move forward with that. But what we're saying is, as a PA, we would also have to try to support him in the process of being able to play.
Just a nugget of information I wanted to give y'all, because I got a lawyer that said that explained something to me about the $75,000 amount that she was suing for. He said, quote, is the minimal amount she had to plead to get into federal court based on diversity jurisdiction. Two parties from different states. Essentially, 75K is a procedural matter that triggered the federal court's diversity jurisdiction, i.e. a plaintiff and defendant who live in different states. The claim will probably end up being for over $1 million. The reason why they bring that up, and the reason why I'm bringing it up to y'all, is obviously the fact that that is the goal, that she has bigger plans. Don't you think that may factor into the league's thinking in terms of addressing this issue?
Could become criminal.
Well, the fact that she, according to speculation, has bigger plans should factor into the NFL taking Antonio Brown and the rest of their players aside and stressing to them how important it is to scrutinize the females that you allow into your life while you're at the epicenter of this limelight that we call fame. And that's why I always try to stress that to you brothers out there. We're just regular people. But you meet these women and you never know what they have planned. Because especially in this modern day time, with the liberal woman, her mindset is to get what she can out of someone. When you're famous like an Antonio Brown, you never know what someone has as an ulterior motive, or, you know, working on the back burner when it comes to why they're interacting with you. I never understand why these dudes have children and engage in serious relationships while they're playing. You should hold that off until after your career is over. And when you decide to engage in a sexual rapport or dynamic with someone that you're working alongside, you never know how that can explode. Because it's not the first time that we've heard about someone working for a professional athlete who claimed that they sexually harassed them.
The fact that they can foreshadow that.
I believe they can, but a lot of what we deal with is not foreshadowing. We want to deal in fact. And when these conversations happen about Antonio Brown, it'll be about the facts that we have, the things that we know.
According to the Players Association, I'm saying that's not always, if I'm correct, that's not always your argument against the league. The league tries to foreshadow and they try to cut things off in the past while y'all try to keep them in the here and now.
Fact,
is that correct?
This is not how Roger Goodell wanted to start the 100th NFL
No way.
season.
No way.
I disagree with that. I think that Roger Goodell understands, at least from an entertainment perspective, that Antonio Brown has brought a lot of attention to the NFL even before the season started. And as people say, there's no such thing as bad publicity. It can be flipped around. It's just another narrative, another storyline that they're going to use to help promote the league in the long run. What's going to be very interesting is if this story is blown up, and when I say blown up, meaning diced up, scrutinized, and revealed to be phony, are they going to spend 20-minute segments talking about how they should apologize to Antonio Brown? Are some of these men who are in positions of power going to start talking about what the retribution should be for these females who make these false accusations? I doubt it. But anyway, Antonio Brown is a pupil of Narcissus, and he's most likely going to meet a very similar demise to Narcissus. So peace.